They told me I was the problem before anyone even knocked on my door, neighbors swapping thin smiles like poker chips, an email thread that read more like a courtroom transcript, and a woman in a pressed blouse who introduced herself as the voice of the neighborhood and then made it clear she meant to be the voice of my life. I never wanted a fight. Not really. I wanted my land to breathe, my dog to run, a place where mornings smelled of coffee and hay. But one hot July morning, someone in a vest stepped across a fence, and everything I thought I was going to be fell away. That one step, that little act of trespass, is the reason I tell you this now. My name's Eli Rowan, and I've been on this patch of scrub and oak for almost 20 years, a little under 40 acres. I fixed with my own 2 hands, a barn that leans just enough to make me proud, a porch that creaks in storms, and a back 40 that the coyotes respect because of one big, stubborn dog named Rex. Rex is nothing fancy, part shepherd, part mutt, all heart, the kind of dog that remembers you even when you forget to remember yourself. He sleeps at my feet. He patrols the property like he owns it. And when he looks at me, there's this quiet that says everything's going to be okay until it isn't. Redford Hollow used to be sleepy, a place where folks minded their own business. But someone started whispering about standards and property values, and whispers turn into rules fast when there's money or reputation attached. That someone was Carla Mendel. She wore authority like perfume, all polished and practiced, and she convinced half the street that the association was salvation. Carla hired Tommy Reed to enforce the rules. Tommy, with his cheap vest and a sense of power that had been waiting for permission. He wasn't a cop, he wasn't a sheriff, but he liked how the word enforcement sounded when he said it, so he acted like one. At first, it was little things, a note on my gate about an unapproved structure. It was my grandmother's old shed that leaned into the sun. Then a flyer slipped under my door claiming Rex was a dangerous breed. They put up signs at the entrance about vigilance and community standards and made the whole thing sound noble. I went to one board meeting because I thought talking would fix it, because common sense usually does when it's allowed to do its job. But Carla smiled with teeth that didn't meet her eyes and said, "Rules are rules, Eli," as if that meant anything without context. Tommy sat beside her, like a man at a poker table waiting for a cue to rattle chips. The line that pushed me was when Tommy started showing up by the fence. He would park his truck on my road and climb the bank to stand where he didn't belong, on my side of the property line, clipboard in hand, phone out, taking photos the way a man files evidence against a stranger. Just documenting, he'd say when I asked him to step back, but documentation isn't harmless when the documentation is meant to make your life easier to dismantle. There was a satisfaction in the way he watched Rex, a slow, hungry calculation that made my skin crawl. The day he pulled Rex at the fence, everything changed. It was late afternoon, the kind of light that makes the pasture look soft and clean, and I was patching a fence post 3 fields over when Rex tore back toward the house, a streak of brown and black, and I heard the shouting. I came around the corner to find Tommy gripping Rex's collar like a man holding proof that he could dominate something that mattered to me. Rex wasn't aggressive. He was protective, a dog doing his job, but Tommy had already decided to make a story out of it. "Keep your dog under control." Tommy barked, like the words had authority because they were loud. And Carla was there too. She arrived in a sensible dress, eyes cool as a coin. "Neighbors complained," she said. "We have to enforce the covenants. You don't come onto my land and seize my dog." I told her, hands still dirty, heart pounding the way it does when you stand in front of a storm. "You call the sheriff, you make a report, you do it by the book." Carla laughed, a sound that slid off those polite lips. "By the book? The law is messy, Eli. We keep things clean for the community." Tommy didn't let go of Rex. He tightened his grip, and Rex snarled a sound that meant stay back or you'll regret it, and Tommy stepped harder on the collar, like he wanted a reaction. I moved between them because that's what you do when someone is hurting what you love. "Let him go," I said, low, and Tommy looked at me the way a man looks at a challenge he wants to win. "I can take the dog," he said. "We have reports. Breed notices. If he bites, call the sheriff." I snapped. "Don't play vigilante on my land." Carla pushed forward then. The meeting turned performance. She raised her phone toward me and said, "Eli, you're escalating. You're known for being defensive about your property." There was a cheap hit below the belt, a twist to make me look like the troublemaker. They wanted the optics. They wanted to paint me as wild, as unreasonable, and they're saying it made other neighbors nod at neighborhood barbecues later, the way people nod at things they aren't obliged to understand. I could have walked away. I could have called the sheriff. I did, eventually, but in the span between the phone call and the sheriff's arrival, Tommy gripped tighter, Rex squirmed, and something old and hard in me rose up. Maybe it was the years of fixing what insurance won't touch. Maybe it was the nights I lay awake thinking of the next storm and how little of this world is actually safe. Maybe it was Rex's eyes, wide and pleading. Whatever it was, it moved through me slow and steady. And when Tommy took one more step over the boundary into my yard, I reached for the sideboard where I keep the old revolver I'd had since I was a young man driving cattle. A thing for protection and respect, and sometimes, to my shame, memories of fights I'd lost and won. I don't like telling what happened next because it sounds like an action scene from a movie, and this wasn't a movie for anyone involved, but I will tell you the truth. I pointed the gun, I said, "Get your hand off my dog." And Tommy laughed like a man whose backbone is made of other people's fear. He didn't laugh for long. I fired one shot. Not into the air, a warning. Yes, but the physics of panic left no good choices. The crack split the light. Tommy went down. He wasn't moving like he'd been shot to kill, but he hit the ground and groaned in a way that made me wish the whole world had never learned to pull triggers. The minutes after were a blur of noise and consequence. Neighbors coming out, phones up, Carla screaming that I'd shot an unarmed man, a child crying somewhere down the road, Rex at my heel whining and pressed against my leg. I dropped the gun without thinking because metal felt like betrayal, and the siren, slow at first, then fast, came like a verdict I'd been waiting for and afraid of. Sheriff Mathis came with more patience than any man deserves when he faces a neighbor with a gun. He listened to Tommy's moans. He listened to Carla's polished fury. Then he listened to me, quiet, explaining that Tommy had no authority, that Rex had been provoked, that I had felt cornered. He took statements, and reality cracked open in lots of small ways. Tommy had no badge, no commission. Carla had been quietly nudging complaints from neighbors who'd been promised lower dues if property values climbed. The reports were, in several cases, exaggerated. The sheriff told me to expect legal heat, and he was right. In the weeks that followed, there were questions, depositions, cameras in my driveway, a smear campaign in a local paper that called me an unstable landowner. There was also a flip side. People I thought were gone forever as friends came around the porch and offered coffee, and the county attorney's office, after looking through evidence, found that Tommy had indeed been trespassing and that Carla's HOA had likely overstepped multiple times. Lawsuits bloomed like late summer weeds, against Tommy for impersonation and assault, against the HOA for harassment, and a private suit against me that never quite landed because the sheriff's reports and a neighbor's security footage showed Tommy crossing the line first. But legality doesn't smooth things out. There are mornings I wake and feel the event like a weight behind my eyes. There are neighbors who avoid me like the town avoids a bad harvest. I dreamed, for a while, that justice would mean a clean ending. Tommy prosecuted, Carla disgraced, my name cleared, but life kept reminding me that endings are complicated. Tommy pleaded to a lesser charge and got a sentence that felt soft and hard at the same time. Carla resigned from the board, but kept enough friends to keep a certain silence around her name. The HOA dissolved eventually when too many members refused to be part of their games. I rebuilt small things, a new post where the old fence had been torn, a fresh coat on the porch, and I spent afternoons with Rex, watching the sky unfurl its slow, impossible blue. The community's heartbeat shifted. Some folks learned to ask questions before they joined a chorus. Others stayed silent, and gossip, like grass, kept finding a way through cracks. For me, the deepest change was inside. I was forced to reckon with what it meant to defend a life, the difference between protection and retaliation, the slippery moral ground where a man can become the thing he resists if he's not careful. If there's a moral I'd offer, and I'm not much for preaching, it's this: boundaries matter, and power without accountability will find ways to dress itself as righteousness. People in suits and vests can make rules sound like gospel, but a rule without human context is a blade made for convenience. I learned to ask for the sheriff earlier, to carry a camera on the porch, to write down names and dates, and keep receipts for everything that matters. I also learned to sit with the heavy quiet of having taken a life-altering action and accept that some questions the world asks you can't be answered with a single gesture of proof. They require patience, humility, and a willingness to live with the consequence. So I'm here telling you not because I want sympathy, but because I want to put this out where folks can argue over it, because sometimes the arguing is useful. Was I right to raise a gun to protect my dog and my land? Was Carla wrong to marshal neighbors into a crusade that had no legal backbone? Was Tommy a victim of his own ambition or a man who should have known better than to step where he didn't belong? Leave me your verdict in the comments. Tell me if you'd have acted different. Tell me about your own fights over fences and rules and the people who think they know how to run your life. If this story made you think, share it. And if you want to see how I piece the rest of this life back together, hit subscribe. We've all got neighbors. And sometimes the only thing that keeps a man honest is the sound of strangers arguing about him.